W. That was very clear. From what I heard, they weren't a decision-making group. They were like an action group. There were people who needed to come together now and then to discuss together what needs to be done, or what is getting done, and what should be getting done. And then they disperse and go back and do what they need to do as a result of these meetings. B. Okay. And you attended one meeting? W. Only one. B. And in what capacity did you attend this meeting? W. By sheer accident. I thought it was a normal 3-monthly meeting because I looked at the email list, which had familiar names on it, and I was on it. But by that time, because of the senior position I held within the city, I just thought it was quite normal for me to be earmarked for this kind of meeting. So when I went to the meeting, it wasn't the same venue as before. It was a livery company venue, which is quite unusual, but not too unusual to wonder why. I went to this meeting and it was not the meeting that I was expecting. I believe I was invited. It was because of the position I held and because they believed that, like themselves, I was one of them. B. So you were included because they already knew you. You were regarded as a safe pair of hands. W. Absolutely. Yes. I was a safe pair of hands. I was a doer. I was one of the people who, at my level within the organization, got things done. B. Okay. W. And I was regarded as that. Lots had known me for some time, even the most senior figures within them. I mean, it was first name terms, that sort of thing. And I'd also been regularly invited to various functions, social functions, and things like that where I became familiar with some of them and some of them became very familiar with me. So it was easygoing, quite professional, nothing out of the ordinary, although bells started to ring about what they were up to and what they were doing and the kind of decisions that they were making, which by and large, I ignored. It seems unusual, but there was a part of me that wanted to ignore what was going on. B. Are you saying that in this particular meeting we're talking about, the people who attended the meeting were familiar to you, largely, and who'd attended other meetings with them before? But this was a meeting with a difference because it was in a different location and with a different agenda, although the delegates to the meeting were basically the same group. Is that what you're saying? W. No, not exactly. I knew most of the attendees at the meeting, but not all. There were about 25 or 30 people were at the meeting. And it was looked rather informal, you know, people getting to know one another, reacquainting themselves as people do. There was nothing unusual about that. It was when the subjects started to come up that my astonishment started to rise at what was being said. B. And then describing, which I can only say is the timeline of events that they had anticipated to be happening, to be on course, and lots of concerns because it wasn't. And what was meant to happen on the timeline that hadn't happened, and what actions were going to be taken for it to happen. And this is where things started to get quite surreal because I'd never been in the company of people like this, talking like that. Now, the group of people who I was most familiar with, the people who do the work within the city, they belong to various well-known financial committees. Some of them quite diverse committees, but they all belong to the same organization. These are people who go unseen. Most people don't know who they are. I know them. I know them by sight, know them by name. I know them by what they do. It was the other people who were there at the time that surprised me. 3 others in particular. There were more people there who were at their type of level as well who I couldn't really identify, but 3 of significance, certainly. B. Okay, now when was this meeting? Let's put a date on it. W. Okay. We're talking 2005. It was after the May general election that's when Blair was voted back in again. That meeting definitely took place sometime in June of that year. B. It is okay to put on record that it was in June? W. June 2005 is fine. Yes. B. All right. Now I wonder then if you could spell out what it was that was discussed at that meeting. Part 1. The Illuminati's plan for World War III. Warning, this interview is long. W. The big thing at the time was Iraq. That was on their agenda, but also, surprisingly, there was lots of conversation and talk about Iran. And what surprised me and really raised my eyebrows was mention, Open mention. This was people talking comfortably to one another, not arguing or shouting but talking comfortably about the Israeli reluctance to strike and provoke Iran into armed action. There was something that really raised the hairs on the back of my neck. And it seemed as if the Israeli government was tied onto what was going on there and had a role to play which was being dictated outside Israeli borders. A year later, Israel attacked Iranian-backed Hezbollah bases in Lebanon. And then the second thing that came out that I recall quite clearly was mention of Japanese reluctance to create havoc within the Chinese financial sectors. I really couldn't understand why they were talking about that and why that had any importance. What I picked up from this seemed to be the Japanese government, or those in Japan, being coerced or ordered into doing something that would wreck or slow down the Chinese rise to financial power. It was mentioned that China was growing too quickly and the main beneficiary of that growth was the Chinese military, which was getting modernized, mostly through the money that they were getting from the world market. I was on the periphery of this meeting and I could feel the anxiety just rise up inside me because this was stuff that was getting spoken about off the cuff. It wasn't getting announced to anybody. This was things that they already knew about. So then there was open talk about the use of biological weapons, where and when they would be used, and the timing. And timing always appears to be crucial. And then there was more talk centered on how Iran must be engaged militarily in order to provoke the desired military response from China. There was a clear expectation of goading Iran into some sort of armed conflict with the West, with China coming to the aid of Iran. Through this goading, either China or Iran would use a tactical nuclear weapon of some sort. And, as I mentioned, these people weren't making decisions. They were discussing something that had already been planned, so they were simply sharing their information between themselves. And it became clear as these discussions went on that the central issue of this meeting was when the balloon would go up, when all this would happen. Other talk centered on dealing with finances, resources, protection of assets, and the control of these resources and bringing in outlying assets. And I can go through this chain of events with you now, Bill, if you like. I'd be really happy to go into as much detail as you feel you can. Okay. Now, as I previously mentioned, they needed either the Chinese or the Iranians to be guilty of the first use of nuclear weapons in order to justify the next stage. Now, I've already added, and this is anecdotal, so it can't be confirmed. But my information coming through in this meeting, and from elsewhere, positively indicates that the Iranians do indeed have a tactical nuclear capability right now. They're not developing it. They've got it. Some say they might have got it from the Russians, maybe. Do you have any idea about that? I believe it's from the Chinese. From the Chinese. Okay. It's because the Chinese technology has been, for many years, used in their missile systems. They're getting missile technology also from the Russians as well, but this is mostly ground-to-air missile systems, that sort of thing, defensive weapons. Tactical missile weaponry. That technology is coming via China. Do you have some expertise in this subject from your own military background? Yes, I do. Okay, so this means that in this meeting where you were hearing this information, you were able to hear this wearing your military hat, with your military experience, and understand strategically and tactically what it was they were talking about and why. Oh, absolutely. I could have even stepped in and corrected their terminology because I believe they were getting it wrong, but they were just describing it the best way they could. Right. So yes, I do have quite a deep knowledge of those types of weapons, and weapons systems in general. Now, the other side of the coin is Iran. Now, Iran is being continuously backed by China and then later by the Russians. And also by other countries too. The military market is quite an open one, and in that we can even include the French, who quite independently export their weapons out wherever they can. Yes. Even in defiance of conventions in place about the sale of weapons,